Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm Austin Falingo, and thank you for joining me in this new series called Creating Jazz Melodies for JamPlay.com. Every week we're going to learn a new technique or device that's going to help you kind of craft jazz melodies and most definitely have a much better understanding. This is going to be a great course for anybody that's, into getting into jazz but doesn't really maybe know how, or, sometimes jazz can be a little scary as there's a lot of chords and such. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a little piece, a device, a harmonic technique, all kinds of fun stuff. This is going to be a 12-week course, and every week we're going to kind of incorporate something else into into crafting melodies here, right? So this is week one. Hope everybody's doing well. So with this course, like most courses, you're gonna have a track with a melody and without, and you're also gonna have access to the GP file, the PDF, and all that, so you can practice this on your own. So what I did here was, for this course, is there's a word called contrafact, right? And what a contrafact is when you take a chord progression and you put another melody over it. This really, got popular, especially in the bebop era. If you look at a tune, an old tune like Back Home in Indiana, for instance, and then you have Donna Lee, right? It's the same exact chords with a different melody. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing in this course. I'm going to take a tune and we're going to play it in the style of, and we're going to use, like I said, a new harmonic, arranging all kinds of different devices to kind of give you a good grasp on how to craft your own melodies. Also, too, by doing this, I think it's going to give you a lot of a good foundation for improvising too. So yeah, we'll get started. So the first week here, just a little intro, we're playing a song titled Silky Doll in the style of Satin Doll, which was written by Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn in 1953. So it's a medium kind of tempo tune. All these tunes really are going to be pretty medium tempo. And like I said, feel free to, bump them up once you really get a grasp, but it's around 100 beats a minute, I think 102 actually. So let's get started. So first off here, I'm just going to play the track with the melody. And let me just get set up here. Yeah, and then so we can hear it, and then I'm going to play it, and then we're going to kind of start getting into how to actually approach getting this stuff ready. So we'll have our chart on hand so we can watch, and then like I said, we'll explain it. So here's our track. Okay. So that's what it sounds like. Now I'm going to play I'm going to show you exactly how I do it with my hands, and then we'll kind of start, getting into it. Now, a few things before we get started, right? A lot of jazz tunes, like all music in the world, there's a lot of forms, right? So like a really, really popular form in, jazz that you see in the real book, also known as the Great American Songbook, right? They kind of go hand in hand. Just some folks call them real books, some people call them the Great American Songbook. It's an AABA form, right? 32 bar tunes, 8 bars, then A again, sometimes slightly different, and you'll see I did a little twist there just to make it a little bit more interesting. And then you have a B, which is like your bridge, and then another A out. Now the other thing you're going to notice, which is also very popular in jazz, is what you would call a tag. So what is a tag? A tag generally is the last, it could be anywhere from, really 2 to 8 bars, but let's say 2 to 4, sometimes 8. And what you do is you just kind of repeat the melody at the end as a statement, right? And it's essentially like a loop. And it just kind of solidifies and let the listener know that, we're done with the song. So that's what you're hearing on here. Now, like I said, let me get set up here, and I will play it, and then we can start really getting into it. All right, here we go. Okay. And I apologize, I kind of flubbed that first part, but you get the idea. We got into it, right? Okay, so there's our melody. Now the thing is when I used to learn this stuff, it's a lot to put together. It's like there's a lot of chords, and then it's also like how do you visually see those melodies, and that is really the key. If you could start to see that via arpeggios and stuff, which we're going to get into here in a bit, that is the key to really being able to play this stuff. And to this day, by the end of this entire course, you'll be much better at it, I promise. But yeah, I tend to, when I play melodies, for popular tunes or whatever, if you can really see your arpeggios, know the chord changes, it's it becomes a lot simpler than just a bunch of crazy notes under a bunch of crazy chords, right? So first off, let's talk about the chord progression. Now in jazz, you hear this all the time. You got to know your 2-5-1s. You got to know your 2-5-1s, right? So what is a 2-5-1? Well, it's the second degree, right, going to the fifth, going to the 1. So in this case, this song is in the key of C, right? And it starts on a 2 chord, D minor 7, right? G7. Now the thing is, it doesn't go to 1 there, but that is the relationship with the 2-5-1, right? And especially on a guitar, if you're starting with your root, from your 5th string and then root to 6th, it makes for a nice easy pattern and transition, right? So with that being said, let's kind of go over the chords first, and like the choices that I would make that I find are super useful, and they work every time. It doesn't get in the way. Now you're going to notice too, with jazz, you can make all kinds of different chords, all kinds of great color chords, and all that kind of stuff. And that's wonderful. You know, if you're doing chord solos, if you're backing up like a singer or something, if it's a small ensemble. But another thing to keep in mind is, and this is why I chose these chords, is you want to use stuff that really doesn't have any colors, right? We're talking roots, thirds, fifths, and sevenths, right? And the reason why is because jazz is such an improvisational music, that if you're using colors and the soloist wants a color, and like say it's a 9 to a flat 9, meaning a half step off, so you get this sound, right? Like a D against a D flat, you can run into problems. So it's best just to kind of stay out of that, you know, until you get comfortable who you're, you know, who you're playing with, what kind of, you know, no choices they like to use when they improvise, and all that kind of stuff, right? So, like I said, if we're looking at our chart here, right? First chord's D minor 7, and it's a split bar, meaning each chord gets 2 beats. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then it goes up a whole step, E minor to A7, right? And then you have A minor 7 to D7, A flat, it's kind of the kicker of the tune, to D flat, and then C, right? So chord-wise, here's what I do. I think this is a great, you know, way to kind of play these chords. And also, if you're playing really fast, once you get a hang of, you know, a lot of people were probably used to playing a D minor 7 like this, right? Now the thing is too, you got to keep in mind, like certain types of inversions of chords, even though that's the same chord, see, they sound completely different. Like this is more of like an R&B kind of, you know, that works for this tune if we were to play like a basic D minor 7 like that, you know, from the 5th fret to a G7 like that. But I always like to say it sounds kind of dorky, right? Whereas this, same chord, but it's just so much cleaner and it fits the style a whole lot better, right? So what we're gonna do here is, the way I play a D minor 7, right, is you have your 3rd finger, 5th fret, 5th string. And what I do is I essentially make a mini bar like this, right? So that's like barring, you know, the 3rd fret with your 1st finger there. So you have the D note, right? 5th fret, 5th string. And then your 1st finger gets the minor 3rd right there, because it's a minor chord, right? Which is the F note on the 3rd fret of the 4th string. And then your pinky grabs the 5th fret right there again, right? And there's your flat 7 of the chord, right? Or the C note, because it's a D minor 7. And then you have your root here, based on that mini bar, right? So it looks like that. Now another trick is, if you're ever used to playing like a G7 like this, if you do a G sus, right? G7 sus, pretty much this chord, if you just take away the root here and the root here from the G, right? And just play the middle 4 strings, which is what I'm doing there. That's a D minor 7 like that. Now another thing that I like to talk about is something called a guide finger, right? So once we have established our D minor 7 like that, what you want to do is you want to go to a G7 like this. And the guide finger is your pinky, right? It never leaves that string, it guides you. And then G7, it's just a 3-note voicing, so I have my 1st finger on the root, right, 3rd fret, 6th string, and then I kind of mute my A string with that 1st finger. And then right here, I have my flat 7 with my 2nd finger, 3rd fret, 4th string, and then your pinky's on the 3rd there, right? Kind of like a shell chord voicing. We're going to get into a couple of those. Freddie Green, right? The whole point with these chords, right, is they're crisp, they're clean, and they stay out of the way of the soloist. So we have D minor 7 like that, right? Right, and then it's our 2-5-1, and now we have another 2-5-1, right? This song is full of 2-5-1s like I was talking about earlier. Here's your E minor 7. Same exact voicing, you just take it here and shift it up. Right? And then our new sequence of chords here is going to be an A minor 7, and like I said, that's not wrong, it's just not quite as hip, you know, for the jazz sound. So how I make an A minor 7, second finger, right, sixth string, 5th fret, just like the G7 here, we kind of mute the A string, and then you take your third finger on strings 4, 3, and 2 to make a mini bar, right? And then this is what's so great about this. This is another split bar. We're going A minor 7 to D7th, right? And instead of just playing like a D7 like that, which is great, I'm gonna do that. Very easy switch, right? And that what that is a D7 with an A in the bass, so the 5th, right? So we have A minor 7, right? This finger stays the same. This one does. You just grab your third now with your first finger, 4th fret, 4th string, right? And all these are all diagrammed out with the correct fingerings on the supplemental material too. So, right? And then all it does is the same exact thing down a half step. Right? So all together from the top we have E minor 7, A7, right? A minor to D7, A flat to D flat, and now C. Now the way I play C, there's a million ways to do it, but what I chose was another shell kind of voicing, Freddie Green style. Stays completely out of the way of the soloist, right? There's just nothing but the meat and potatoes to this. And it's a C like that. So what I'm doing is I have my second finger, 3rd fret, 6th string. Once again, you're gonna notice a lot of these kind of chords, we're muting the A string with that finger, right? And then you have your first finger on the 3rd of, which is the 3rd, the E note of the chord, and that's on the 2nd fret of the 4th string. And then what you do is you grab with your pinky right here, and then there's your root, right? And that's pinky, 5th fret, 3rd string, right? And this is gonna cover the A sections, right? E minor 7, A7, using that guide finger. Then you have A minor, D7, right? A flat minor, D flat 7, right? And then a quick E minor again, A7, right? And now we're on our second A section, so that's going to be the exact same chords. E minor 7, A7, A minor 7, D7, A flat minor 7, D flat 7, C. And then C just sits there for 2 bars. Now we're in the bridge, right? So the bridge goes, and this is the exact same type of chords as with A minor to D and A flat minor to D flat, right? So then we have G minor 7 to C7 like that. Like I said, they're all marked out too. And then I'm just playing an F6 like this. Right? So that's a new one, and it's a rootless chord. Like I said, it's got the 5th. And you know, there's always a lot of rootless, there can be with, you know, jazz. So then you have your C or your 5th, right? 2nd finger, 5th string, 3rd fret. and then you have your third finger, 3rd fret, 4th string. Then you have your pinky grabbing, so that's the root, and then your pinky, or I'm sorry, your first finger grabs the 3rd, which is the A note, right? So it's like that. Essentially, it's just like a triad. And then on top, you can put your 6th, which is the D note of the F, right? So from the bridge, we have G minor 7, C7, F. Then we have A minor, again, same exact shape. And then we just have straight G7. Then back to our last A section. D minor 7, G7, D minor 7, G7, E minor 7, A7, E minor 7, A7, A minor 7, D7, A flat minor 7, D flat 7, C again, right? So, that's a great way to play the chords. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I really like the guide finger thing because say this tune, you're playing it really fast and you're reading a chart or something. Like having these types of chords under your belt, you know, and it is great. And like I said, if you're playing fast, see, it's the same exact shape. You know, as we all know by that saying, you know, you want to work smarter, not harder, right? So just a little food for thought. That's why I kind of chose those chords. And even if they are kind of new and awkward a little bit to you, I really recommend, you know, getting used to them just for the fact that they sound great. They're easy to get under your hands once you get them under your hands. Yeah, they just work really well. Okay, now let's move on to the melody, right? So how I'm gonna approach this, you know, our melody was right? So there's our first A section, right? Now here's how I see this, right? And this is like the importance. First off, anytime you're learning tunes or whatever, you should know the chords first. I think I get this question a lot as guitar players, you know, we want to solo and stuff all the time, and that's great, but then, you know, somebody will go, well, then I just go for a solo and I kind of get lost, per se, right? And my next question is always, well, do you know the neck? This is a puzzle piece, right? Like the cage system, right? The 5 basic cowboy chord shapes, and then they move up and down the neck. It's great to know that stuff, and the thing is the more that you dial in each area via the cage system, it's like a map that lights up. You know what I mean? You're gonna see all these, you know, all the areas of the neck. So that's really important. Now, with that being said, what I am doing is I'm gonna use like a D minor 7 arpeggio, right? Kind of coming out of second position, right? And usually with positions, the way I look at it is your first finger is going to dictate what it is. So if your first finger, you know, each finger gets a fret, and then if your first finger's here, that would be considered second position. So D minor 7, like that, right? And this is like where if you know your triads, that helps a ton, right? But within that, right, you know, the chord right here, and this is why I chose this one because we're basing it off of a D minor 7 like this. I use this arpeggio. Right? Right? You know, it's good to learn it up and down, and this is just a root, a third, and a fifth, right? So pinky, there's your root, right? 5th string, 5th fret. Then your second finger, 3rd fret, 4th string. There's your flat, your minor 3rd, right, or the F note. And then right here we have the A, right, which is the 5th. And then with your first finger, and then there's your with your second finger, I'm grabbing the root again. And then this is where you jump out of position a little bit, right? Because we're down one, but that's the minor third again, the F note. And then your pinky up here on the A note, right? So we have... right? And from there, too, you know, your G7 is right there as well. So if here's your G7, I'd look at the, you know, right? So like I said, right? There's your actual G7, right? So by seeing that, right, and covering in that area, when we begin to learn this melody, you're going to go, oh, well, that makes sense, you know? So it's always really good to, like, think like that. Like, a huge mistake I made, you know, young, I would just learn these melodies and learn them in one area on the neck and be like, oh, that's where you play it. And then once I really dug in, learned the cage system, learned my arpeggios and like really did the work, right, all around the neck, I went, oh, well, of course that works, right? So knowing that, what you'd want to do then, you know, and all the chords you're going to notice I did, I'm not really jumping around a whole lot. I'm trying to keep everything sort of in the same area. That just makes things easier, and it also helps you really dig out the territory there. But for E minor 7, here's, right, to A7 like that. Right, D, you know, or E minor 7, A7, right, it's all right there. A minor 7, you know, D7, right, and then same thing down a whole. A flat, right, and then D7, or D flat 7, I'm sorry, right, and then to C. Right? We're using that chord mostly, right? So there's like your arpeggios, and then it's going to be the same thing for, there's your G minor 7 for the bridge, C7, and so on. But let's back up here for a second, right? So, with this first lesson here, you know, in creating jazz melodies, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the chord tones, right, of these chords. And like I said, knowing those arpeggios is most definitely going to help you see everything better, right? So our melody, and we can, you know, like I said, you have the GP file, PDF, you have a track with the melody and without to practice this. You know, recommend doing it both ways. Now we can start looking at the melody and see what it's coming from, right? So from the beginning we have 1, right? 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 Now, the thing is, like I said earlier, there was a time when I would be like, oh, that's just a cool melody. But look. It's coming from that arpeggio, right? And the thing about melodies, and especially if you use cool rhythm and stuff, you can create a great melody with just arpeggio notes. It doesn't have to be scalular. You know, I mean, eventually, you know, you'd want to use both, right? But that's what we have here. D minor 7, G7, right? Right, 1, 5th of the D minor 7, and then there's the F, which is the third, or the minor third, root, right? Right, flat 7, right? There's our C. And then then we're ending, because it ends on the G chord, there's the third of the G. Right? Right, so all together we have 1. Right? Move it up a whole step. Now here's the thing about melodies too. Simple really works. I think sometimes we tend, we learn all this knowledge, and you want to like overplay or whatever, but simple is great. And a motif. Well, what's a motif? It's essentially like a little music idea, that kind of keeps coming back. If you listen to a lot of great tunes, right? I mean, they're going to repeat those sections, right? Because that, if it was something different every time, you wouldn't, it wouldn't be a melody, right? So all I'm doing now, here's the beginning, 1. And then move it up a whole step. Right? And, just for lack of time, I have all the correct fingerings that I would use in the chart. So I would look at that, but once you get that arpeggio down like that, oops. It makes a lot more sense, and you can visually see it, as well as hear it. So we have 1. 1. Right? Now here's the end part of the A sections, right? Well, where did that come from, right? Like I said, I used to always just think it was just random, but it's not. It comes from, right? There's your A minor. There's your D. And all I'm doing is taking the top of that with another, interesting rhythm. 1. Right? So you have your flat third, right, which is the C note of the A minor 7 to the root. What did I do next? Move down a half step, same thing. You have the flat third and the root of the A flat. Now the thing too, it's also, that's the flat 7 of the D chord, right? The D 7th chord. And then this is the 5th of it, right? So this is what I mean by just using simple chord tones. Right, and then sliding in. And another thing too, with doing jazz stuff, you don't really bend as much. It's more of a lot of sliding. So definitely I would say get used to kind of, right? Right, and then we have our C chord there, dun, dun, and then I let that ring out, and there's our E note. Well, right before we go back to the second A section, right, you have your E minor 7 to your A7 again. Well, I chose to leave that note there. Well, why? Because E is the root, for that quick little turnaround, right, before we go back to A section number 2, it's the root of the E minor. So coast is clear there. It's also the 5th of the E7, right? So all together we have 4, 1, right? 1, right? Dun, dun, dun. Second A section. Same thing. Now here's what I did here. In the beginning I said sometimes, you do an A and then you have like your A, 2 or what, which is the second A. But what did I do to make it a little bit interesting? I put a little chromatic line in there, right? I went with a triplet, right? So exact same fingering. Right, pinky, third, and like I said, all the fingerings are marked out so you can actually see it on the page that you're gonna have here too. Same thing. Right, and then same thing. And then I just left it right there. Right? Now we're at the bridge, right? Same exact thing. G minor 7, just same grip like these were, right? But here we have to F, right? So what did I do there? I had a pickup note, you know, dun, dun, dun. Here's the end of the A section. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 2. Same thing, right? What is this note in terms of G minor? Well, it's the flat third of the B flat. What is it in terms of C? It's the flat 7, right? So it works. You could sit on that note. It gives space. Space is always a great thing, right? Root, right? C7, there's your third, the E note. And then I just let it sit again for the F note. You know, and think about, you know, some of these great melodies that we listen to, whether it's jazz, pop, whatever, country, they're simple. You know, you don't need much. You know, you got to think about it like conversation. Like, you don't run up to somebody and just start talking a mile a minute and you know, being all in their face, right? Like, you got to think the same with, you know, melodies. And like, look, like I said, guys, we're literally using chord tones, right? With some, you know, cool rhythm that's just not straight eighth notes or something. And it, you know, it works just fine. And it sounds believable. It sounds like a real melody, right? So we have G minor to C7. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, F, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Same thing. Up a whole step, right? Because that's where we are in the bridge now. Then the G7, so we have 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, D7, right? And then where do I go? I go to my G note, right? And it works great too because here's our D7, right? Just move up a half step, and then you have the G for the, you know, for the bar, and then to add a little bit of spice at the end, right? I go. So we have whole entire bridge is 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, C7, grabbing the third, 2, 3, and then just the fifth of the F chord, right? Shift it up a whole step. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, D7, now G, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, and right, and then we're back to the last A section. We have right, 1, same thing, and here's our tag, right? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 again. 2, 3, 4. One more time to close it out. 3, 4, 1. And voila, we have the Silky Doll melody now, right? So hopefully that makes sense. And the big thing, you know, let's just kind of recap and we'll play it again. And just looking at my notes here, making sure I'm not, yep, okay, we're good. Yeah, start with your chords first. Understand the form, A, B, A, right? Put your chords, do your arpeggios around there. Like, it makes no sense to do that arpeggio from there if you're here, right? And honestly, what you should do is you should definitely do both because, and that's, like I said, the process of learning caged, the chords, the scales, the arpeggios around that whole system, because then what that does is it gives you the power to play that melody wherever you want. Right? That would be like a different option, And the thing is, you know, we want those options because some people might not like that arpeggio, but what's important is that you see it there, right? And then when you go to write a melody or, you know, learn a melody or something, it's not just like foreign, you know, territory, right? So yeah, like I said, that's just that week one here, building a melody just with chord tones and, you know, just being a little intuitive and being like, okay, like we're talking about, you know, does this, you know, do those notes fit within the chords? Is it in their DNA? Yes. And then, like I said, it's simple. The other thing I was going to say, which I sort of mentioned earlier, is this is repetitive in a way, right? But just a little chromatic thing in like A section 2, splitting the bridge, you know, with different chords and slowing it down instead of more like, you know, on the bridge we have 2, 3, 4. You know, you can let it breathe, right? And yeah, hopefully, like I said, that will put some insight into just building a melody with chord tones and just kind of knowing your area, knowing your arpeggios, playing the right chords, and then most importantly, have fun. You know, another great way to like learn this kind of stuff, work on an A section. Do you have it? Great. Next A section, maybe with a little bit difference. Do you have it? Great. You know, break it off into 8-bar sections, you know, and over a couple of weeks. And it's less overwhelming. It makes it less frustrating. It becomes more fun. You know, another thing, just like with practicing too, is if you're killing the A sections, then don't pick up your guitar and play the A section. Start on the bridge, right? Because, like I said, you want to work smarter, not harder, and then start piecing it all together. You know. All right, let's play it one more time, and then we will open it up for some questions here. Here we go. And there we have it. Great. So I hope that was super helpful. Tune in next week. We're going to keep expanding. We're going to use another new device over a different chord progression, or, you know, in the style of another tune, also known as a contrafact. So thanks, everybody. Yeah, let's do some questions, and then I'll see you next week. All right, thanks. Hey everybody. So I hope you enjoyed week 1 of creating jazz melodies. Yeah, let's get to some questions here. Yeah, okay, great question. Taco Tuesday asked, are there any other grips you like to use for minor 7th chords? Yeah, so kind of like I was talking about in the lesson, I always kind of call chords as like, there's bread and butter chords for every style, right? So like to just sound authentic, like I mentioned in this lesson, like there's nothing wrong with Remember I said it kind of is more like the R&B minor 7th chord? You know, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just doesn't sound as hip in jazz land as like this, right? Right, so the other two options, now also like I mentioned in this lesson, I'm kind of keeping everything in the area of the neck, just because the melody is around there, so that was my intent and purpose with that. If you wanted to learn like the melody in a different spot, like another position, which is the exact inversion that we learned earlier, you know, which was that, right? So you could definitely use those. That's another great one. And then the other option that I like to use, which I talked about briefly, is this. Right? And what that is you have your second finger, 5th fret, 5th string on the D, right? Or the root. And then you have your flat third of the F note on the 3rd fret, 1st finger, 4th string, and then you have your minor 7th note or the C note in the chord, right, with your 3rd finger, 5th fret, 3rd string, and then your pinky grabs, it's an octave, right, of the minor 3rd of the F note, and that's on the 6th fret of the 2nd string. And then what I do a lot with these is instead of like when I went like this to there, with using my guide finger as my pinky, I'll use my 3rd a lot. So like I said, it's a nice switch, especially if you're reading and stuff and you get playing at faster tempos. Once you get that muscle memory going, you know, you're pretty good. And then just bump it up, right, to E minor 7 like that. Hauling boats. I like your handle. Okay, so what's a shell chord voicing? So I touched upon it a little bit. Kind of made popular by Freddie Green. So Freddie Green, you know, great jazz guitar player, and on recordings and stuff, you know, especially like in a big band setting or whatever, he would notice, oh, if I used a 9th in there, right, or a flat 9 or something, it would sometimes mess with the soloist, kind of like I talked about earlier. So a shell voicing generally is just, you know, it has a flat a 3rd or a flat 7 in it, or it could be a minor 3rd, right? But, you know, generally the grips on guitar, you know, it's like your root on your 5th, or sorry, your 6th string, and you'll skip a string, or you can do like, you know, 5th, 4th, and 3rd respectively, but you know, they're just very easy, generally 3-note voicings or so, or 2-note voicings that are definitely like heard, or they're almost felt more than heard, right? They just kind of keep the band going, right? Like if I were to play all shells, you know, with this, with like a real, you know, nice swing, right? Like that C voicing that we learned is a shell. The 5th, then you omit the root there, and then you have your 3rd, and then your root there. And what they are is, like I said, they're useful in jazz, for sure. They're felt, not heard, and they don't really ever have any colors that can get in the way of the soloist. Does that make sense? Okay. Next question. How many key changes are in this tune? Seems like there are a lot. Another good question. So, like I said, it is pretty diatonic, right? And when I say diatonic, what I mean by that is, if you look at the key signature of the chart, right, we're in the key of C, no sharps or flats, and it does land on C eventually. Now, like a lot of jazz tunes, you got to get used to it doesn't always start on a 1 chord, and that can kind of, you know, you got to get over that hump, right? There's just a ton of tunes that are like that. Not that that doesn't happen in pop music and stuff either, but, you know, it's notoriously, you know, popular in jazz. So D minor, right, is the 2nd degree of, you know, there's your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? There's your C scale. And then if you harmonize that, right, you have, so C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, B half diminished, and then back to C major 7, right? So even though we don't go like your classic 2-5-1 where you go to C right there, because that's not how the melody of this tune goes, we jump up to here. But that's also a diatonic chord, because like we just played in a harmonized chord scale, excuse me, that is diatonic. Now the thing is it would naturally be an A minor, and you do have an A7 there. So you have to make that chord a major, because it's a major third, because it is a major chord, right? So that's not. But then you have A minor, which is diatonic, D7, which isn't, so that is what you call a secondary dominant, and we'll get into that some later in this course, I think, as we go through more chord progressions. Like for this lesson, right, we were just kind of trying to build off of chord tone, so really just knowing if it's major or minor or whatever, that helps, like from E minor to A7, right? You know, I grabbed that C sharp to let the listener know that the A7's there, right? But that's diatonic, you know, that's a 2 chord, not too bad. This is the real funky one there, right? So that would be a key change, but also like you can just learn that, think of that as a 2-5-1, right? And then you can play. If this is a 2 and this is a 5, then you just think, well, what's 1? If here's 2, back up a whole step. 1 would be a G flat scale, which we could play there, right? And then back to C, so you're using C scale. And then, and this is what I mean by the series of 2-5-1s, then the next part, which is the bridge, right, the B section, remember the form A-A-B-A, that's a 2-5-1 to F, right? So anytime you're, you know, if things like do, you know, like, because G minor is not part of a C scale, right? It should be a G7. But look at the relationships of where the chord is going next. So a C7 to where? F. Well, 2 is, you know, G minor, that's the second degree of F. So for that part, you would play an F scale, right? And then it jumps up to, right? So there, you can play a G scale. And then just play Mixolydian, you know, because it is a G7 and it has that chord. And remember, a Mixolydian, the only difference between a regular major scale and a Mixolydian is the 7th degree is a minor 7th or a flat 7, also known as a whole step away from the root. Cool. All right, well, that's all the questions we have for today. Good questions. And yeah, stay tuned for next week, and then we'll kind of keep hammering out, you know, this stuff and get everybody creating some melodies, you know, that hopefully it'll make more sense when you go to write one yourself or just play one, you know, out of the real book or the Great American Songbook. All right, y'all. I'll catch you later. Thanks.